years and years of your life as a writer and director go into making a film.
Yeah.
It's a dedication that a lot of us really don't even properly comprehend. Why this story, of all the news stories over the centuries and years, why this one? Why, like, I'm going to dedicate these years of my life to this one?
Well, first off, I wanted to make a fun movie. And I thought the idea of a guy living in a toy store sounded like it was pretty fun. But I was also very interested in the contradictions of this character. He seemed, he was a guy that robbed 45 McDonald's and put people in a freezer, but he made sure they had their jackets on. Here was a guy who's a military veteran who escapes prison and doesn't hide in the woods and eat grubs and rainwater. He hides out in a Toys R Us and eats M&Ms and baby food. Here's a guy that, as he had a plane ticket on his seat next to him, and he was at the off-ramp to the airport, he decided to turn around to go take his girlfriend out to dinner one last time. And I just thought that those contradictions of him as a criminal were interesting because there's a line in the movie where Lakeith Stanfield says, "Good criminals are cold and calculating. You have the calculation part down, but you're just goofy." And I think what Jeff's fatal flaw is as a criminal is his humanity. It's his heart. It's his warmth. If he was more cold-blooded, if he was more sociopathic, he would be on a beach somewhere right now, free. And none of us would know his story. So I think that's what I was drawn to, is this idea of a guy whose humanity was his downfall.
Mm-hmm. And those points you bring up, I'm sure you get asked a lot. I've been asked a lot since I've seen this. Are we supposed to like Jeff?
I don't know. How do you feel? I mean, I think, in movies, we get told a lot about heroes and villains. Mm-hmm. And in my life, I've never met a true hero, and I've never met a true villain. I meet a lot of people that do heroic things, and I meet a lot of people that do villainous things, and sometimes they're the same person. And what I kind of wanted to do with Jeff is just try to tell a portrait of a person. And so you're like any family member or person that you're in a relationship with, I'm sure like people drive you crazy and you love them at the same time. Your kids, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, the people we're closest to are full of those contradictions. Maybe not as extreme as Jeff, but I think that's why Jeff is a movie character to me. And so as an audience, you can feel, I'm not telling the audience whatever to feel with him. That's just my portrait of what I take the man to be. And I think it's valid to be very frustrated with him and to be very mad with him. I think it's also valid to love him and root for him. And, I really took my lead on this from people who I talked to in the film. It was, there was a moment like 2 years in where I was thinking, do I make a movie about a sociopath? Do I make like Taxi Driver? And it was the moment that I talked to Lee, his girlfriend, and Ron, the pastor of the church, that changed my perception. When I spoke with them, I figured they were going to both be pretty bitter with Jeff, that they would feel betrayed, that they would feel angry with him. But they talked about him as if he was like this unicorn that entered their world for 3 months. And as Lee told me, she said he was the greatest adventure of my life. And she didn't regret a thing. And then I asked Pastor Ron, I said, tell me about the Bible. And he said, well, the Old Testament's about judgment. The New Testament's about grace. And that in his life, he tends to err on the side of grace. And I thought to myself, well, society has judged Jeff pretty harshly. He's serving 45 years. And the judge who sentenced him to 45 years is in the film. And I spoke a lot with her about her reasons. But I figured that the movie maybe could follow Pastor Ron's approach and see the guy with some more grace. Not to absolve him of his responsibility, but to just see the man, the man that made these big mistakes, and to see the people that met those big mistakes with big empathy and big grace.
Yeah, I try to meet everybody with grace and empathy, and I appreciated how you handled that in the story and bringing in the pastor and the church family and seeing Jeff interact with those members, because I think that is very important too. Like you said, too, not necessarily loving what he did, but we're all one step away from a bad decision sometimes in our lives. So
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
Channing Tatum was like the perfect guy to play this, and I had so many conversations with Channing, who told me that. He would always tell me that. He was like, I was probably 1 or 2 decisions away from becoming Jeff. I think what happens with Jeff, he makes a bad decision, and then he makes another bad decision, and then pretty soon all he has left is bad decisions.
right.
He couldn't, there was no way out, so he tried to do as good as he could with the decisions he had remaining. But yeah, once you rob 45 McDonald's, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I've been in a lot of small churches. That's probably the best choir I've ever heard come out of us. Was talk about recording those scenes. I know there's a couple of them in there, and they sound really good.
They sound incredible.
Yeah.
So the real church was like that. Pastor Ron loved rock and roll music, and he would play it he would play like Can't Buy Me Love or something on a Sunday morning, and then give a sermon about money and greed. And so it was a way to connect people, and he had a very lively church Sunday mornings. It was like he took Saturday night and brought it all the way into Sunday morning, and gave people a good time, and gave people a good message. And so I wanted to recreate that spirit. It's a very diverse church, but I needed a great band leader. And so I actually ended up, this is a crazy story, the Toys R Us where Jeff actually hid out is now a mega church called Vision Church, and they have a great band. And I used the band leader, this guy named TJ, to lead the band and to lead the choir. And so I picked those songs, the 2 songs. One is the Byrds, a song called I Trust, which the lyrics are, it's hard being human. And then I used this Mahalia Jackson Christmas song, No Room at the Inn, which was one of my favorite Christmas songs. And we recorded both those. And of course, then the Randy Newman song, I'll Be Home. And it was, shooting with that band and that choir and having Ben Mendelsohn sing and Uzo Aduba sing. And it was like I was in heaven.
Yeah. Final question. Peter Dinklage is one of my favorite. He's in everything that he does.
Yeah.
But we don't see a lot of him in the news clips, like the original footage. Was he somebody that was actually part of this, or somebody you just added? Maybe you had a grudge against an old boss. You're like, I'm going to poke him out here.
There was a manager of that store that was in an adversarial relationship with Jeff, unbeknownst to them. Jeff used to do things like when he was really hungry and going crazy in that Toys R Us and sick of eating candy, I guess he saw like a bunch of Hot Pockets in the freezer, and there was a sign on there that said this is the manager's names, like don't eat. And so he tried one, and it was so good that he ate the whole box. And I guess he came in the next day, and in the break room on the whiteboard it said, whoever ate my Hot Pockets, I will find you. And so Jeff wrote on the board, try and find me. And so this went back and forth, over the months and months with him and the manager. He did get caught bathing, giving himself a sponge bath in the middle of the night, because during Christmas season the manager started coming in earlier. But that manager was not available to us to talk, so I had to use some creative license, and I just cast one of my favorite actors, Peter, in it. And yes, he is based on someone very, who will remain nameless in my own life, someone I love very much. And I actually relate to Mitch, to Peter's character, quite a bit, because he's just trying to keep the business going. He's got a lot on his plate, and his focus is Toys R Us and staying, keeping that store afloat.